Since the conflict between Israel and Hamas, the damage caused to the Gaza Strip has been extensive. According to Hamas, the estimated damage is around $250 million. There has been $92 million to residential and NGO buildings. $27 million worth of damage was done to roads, water and sewage systems. $22 million of damage was done to the electrical grid, and $6.5 million damage to communications and internet infrastructure. Now, Egypt, who mediated the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, has announced that it is allocating $500 million for rebuilding efforts in the Gaza Strip. Now, for more, I'm joined by Beth Oppenheim, the Director of International Relations at Gisha Legal Center for Freedom of Movement. Beth, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure. Good morning.
Now, Hamas has issued a statement estimating the damage to the buildings and infrastructure at around $250 million. Does this number sound accurate to you?
Thanks. So I think that estimate could indeed be accurate. We have heard even higher local estimates of economic losses. I just want to share briefly a WhatsApp message that I received this morning from a woman in Gaza, a woman of similar age to me. And she just said, "I feel heartbroken. The destruction in the city is terrifying, but we will build Gaza again." But from what we're hearing, the full picture of the extent of the damage in Gaza is still very much unfolding. We do know that there have been extensive targeting of civilian buildings and infrastructure by Israel, and that's led to very widespread destruction. So some of the initial data just by UN OCHA, the agency, reports that 258 buildings have been destroyed, comprising over 1,000 housing and commercial units. We know that over 1,000 people's homes have been destroyed or completely damaged, leading to basically them being uninhabitable. So a serious kind of amount of damage to civilian infrastructure, education facilities damaged, 53 of them, 6 hospitals, 11 primary healthcare centres, severe damage to hygiene and water infrastructure, and also to electricity lines and networks, leading to a drop in the average power supply in Gaza to around 7 hours a day. So widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure.
And Beth, after Operation Protective Edge in 2014, which was 50 days of fighting, it was estimated that it would take 20 years to rebuild Gaza. Now, after this operation, it will likely take several years as well. Why is it going to take so long to rebuild?
Yes, it's a good question. And I think we know that still back from the 2014 war, things have not been completely rebuilt. Several thousand homes are still not fully repaired. And it seems, unfortunately, that history will repeat itself here. The reason being that Israel imposes very strict restrictions on the entry of goods into Gaza. So that's done under what's called the Gaza Reconstruction Mechanism, the GRM, which is a UN system, which is supposed to scrutinize the entry of construction materials for projects entering Gaza. And in order to make sure that they're not diverted to militant groups. But as a result, this basically results in a huge amount of bureaucracy for people inside Gaza. They have to apply through this system that doesn't have a lot of transparency or oversight, and which means that basically goods can take an extremely long time to reach their intended end user in Gaza. And of course, there's also the issue of the dual use list, which Israel runs. So this is a list of civilian items that can also have a military use. It goes far beyond the internationally accepted list of dual-use goods, and that means that they require special coordination to enter. So this list spans things like steel, metal pipes, cranes, and it's basically extremely extensive. So as a result of both this kind of labyrinthine bureaucracy of the GRM, as well as this dual-use list, it's a very, very slow process for contractors, construction companies to get the materials that they need in order to begin this kind of long and painful reconstruction process.
And also after Protective Edge, $3.5 billion was pledged to aid in rebuilding Gaza. And a year later, less than half had actually even been dispersed. Did the rest of the funds ever make it, or were they promises not even kept?
Yes, so broken pledges are certainly an issue. We know that from the most recent data from March 2018, just over half of promised funds had been disbursed, so a large gap essentially. But we know that this slow reconstruction process is not just a cash flow issue. This is to do with Israeli restrictions on the entry of essential materials. And I think it's also important to say that what we see time and again is that Israel assumes that the international community is going to come to the rescue of Gaza residents. And in the meanwhile, Israel is willing to basically cause serious destruction to civilian infrastructure in Gaza, and then to also circumvent its responsibilities as the continued occupying power in Gaza. It doesn't want to meet its obligations to rebuild Gaza. And further still, it actually obstructs the international community from beginning this process of reconstruction. And the UN Special Coordinator said last week in his speech to the UN Security Council, he basically warned the two warring parties that the international community weren't going to be capable of delivering the kind of pledges that they have done in the past. He mentioned the kind of global economic downturn during the coronavirus pandemic. So I think it's important to say that there's donor fatigue as an issue here. And these kind of cycles of destruction, reconstruction, destruction, understandably generates reluctance from donors to actually intervene and invest in reconstruction. So I think the key issue here is that there needs to be a longer-term political solution, not just these kind of short-term responses.
Okay, Beth Oppenheim, Director of International Relations at Gisha Legal Centre for Freedom of Movement. Thank you so much for your time and for explaining that all to us. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.